Well, the reaction of the business world to Trump's decision is significant. Let's talk to Christopher Wright. He's a professor of organisational studies at the University of Sydney, and he's the author of Climate Change, Capitalism and Corporations. He joins us via Skype from Sydney. Christopher, Donald Trump said he's withdrawing from the deal on economic grounds, but what does this really mean for American businesses and the economy?
Well, it's an extremely disappointing outcome. In terms of jobs and the economy, it's clear that there's an energy transformation taking place around the globe. As your correspondent just outlined in China, massive investment in renewables, and that's a trend that's happening around the world. And so it leaves America in a situation where it's wedded to 19th, 20th century technology around the continued exploitation of fossil fuel energy. So it's disappointing in that respect, because I think the outcome for jobs and the economy in the US is going to be a retrograde one.
It's an interesting point you make about fossil fuels, Christopher, because Trump says he'll open new coal plants and that renewable energy is about only 1% of the energy mix. So, I mean, are fossil fuels here to stay?
Well, they can't be. We know the science. We know the carbon budget we have left to avoid 2 degrees or exceeding 2 degrees Celsius this century. We're on track for 4 degrees Celsius. So this fossil fuels forever imaginary is a fantasy. We can't do it unless we are willing to put at risk the future of human civilization. It is that catastrophic. So maintaining or expanding fossil fuel reserves not only flies in the face of the sort of economic transformation that's happening in the energy system globally, but flies in the face of established science and the future of human civilization.
China and the EU want to forge an alliance to tackle climate change. But let me ask you, can the rest of the world really carry on without the United States?
Well, no. We need the United States involved in this process because historically it has been the major emitter. The sort of climate change we're now seeing in terms of extreme weather events, these sorts of things are the product of the fossil fuel emissions of the United States, Britain and Europe over the last century. The climate change we will see in the future will probably be the result of the emerging countries, the developing countries. So we need the United States involved because it's still the second biggest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world. So it has to be part of this process. So the hope is that we can bring it back into the fold. And of course, the Paris Climate Agreement was always one that we aim to expand upon.
Christopher, just a final thought from you quickly. I mean, Trump's talking about renegotiating the deal or perhaps even coming up with a new one. But even the Europeans have already said that can't happen.
No, it can't, because the agreement was based upon voluntary intended emissions reductions. There's a target of around 26% reduction in emissions over a certain time period. But it was always the ambition that we would increase those emissions targets to avoid 2 degrees. So it's not a question of negotiating a new agreement with lesser standards. They are already the sort of lesser standards. With those, that goal, that will result in around 3 degrees Celsius increase in temperature. So we need to actually accelerate the emissions reduction.
Christopher Wright, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera. Lots more.